Chapter 15. Going back to school was like being shoved into a coffin. It was strange that it bothered me so much. I mean, I had been out of school before, for spring break, summer vacations, and the occasional suspension, but going back had never bothered me so much before. It felt like I haven't seen my friends in years. Talking to them was strange. All they wanted to talk about were the parties from last week and the new couples and who was now on probation. Apparently, the big news was that Rick had bought some drugs and was trying to sell them around school. None of that seemed real to me anymore. I felt out of touch. But what I had been through, well, that was something unreal for them. I tried to talk to Mike about it, but I gave up because I had no idea how to explain what had happened to me, what it meant to me. So all I ended up saying was that I was serving my time on a ranch and that I had helped deliver a baby horse. Even saying that was too much. Mike started razzing me and even went so far as trying to make a horse sound. He didn't do it very well, but he did it loud enough to attract some attention. "Yo man, where's your pet dog?" an angry voice called out from the back of the hall. Mike glared at Rick. "What dog?" "I don't know. Sounds like you ate one and he's trying to get out." Some of the kids who had started to gather around us giggled nervously. Then Rick turned his attention back to me. "Yo, farm boy, we still got some things to settle." I just looked at him, using my best imitation of Mr. Hassler's bored stare. The bell rang, and I could see two teachers approaching the group forming around us. I shrugged. "Whatever, man. Ain't no thing to me." I turned and started to walk away. Rick grabbed my sore shoulder. I didn't let him know how much it hurt. "Oh, but it is, man. It is," he snarled. "Let's get going to class, guys. Come on, you're going to be late for first period," Mr. Darrell said behind Rick. I shook Rick's hand off my shoulder and followed Lee to math. During the morning classes, I was quiet. I ignored people if their conversation bored me. Most of the time it did, because it seemed like everyone was convinced that Rick and I still had something to settle. At least that's what he had told everyone. A few people asked about my community service and wanted to know if I had to pay a fine too. The guys and some of the girls were interested in case they were ever in my shoes. Most of the girls, though, just looked like they were scared of me. By third hour, I had started talking a little more. I was careful about the way I answered questions about my week, but as long as this was causing such a stir, I thought I may as well enjoy it. No need to come off looking like a nerd. The only time I really felt normal again was in Mrs. Walker's class. The other teachers had glanced at me indifferently. I knew most of them didn't believe I would ever do the makeup work, so they didn't take much time to explain how to do it. But Mrs. Walker knew that I had done my work and that I would do the rest of my assignments. She didn't think it was because I wanted to. She thought it was because I was staying with Mr. Hassler. As soon as I sat down, she asked me, "Do you have your hero paper, Sean?" "Yep," I said, "right here." And I opened my book to a series of math problems. I couldn't believe it. "Sean," she was waiting. I left it in my locker," I stuttered. Mrs. Walker sighed and looked at me with those disappointing eyes. It must be a requirement for teachers to know how to make you feel guilty just by looking at you. "I really did," I said, wanting desperately to be believed. "Look, I just grabbed the wrong book. I'll go get it." "No, Sean, you know you can't go back to your locker. Bring it to me first thing after school." "I will," I answered. She turned to the class. "Mrs. Walker?" She turned back. "I really did finish it." She smiled sadly and started the day's lesson. Word had gotten around about my community service by lunchtime, in a big way. It gave me the opportunity to lay back and be cool for the afternoon. I didn't have to say anything. Everybody else was telling my story for me. By the end of the day, the whole school knew that I was just kicking it at an old fart's ranch. They believed he was such an old geezer that I really didn't have to do any work because he didn't pay any attention to what got done. But as soon as the last bell rang, I bolted. I'd never moved so quickly through the hallways. I was in and out of my locker in record time. Mrs. Walker must have left early, so I left my paper on her desk on my way out. I didn't even want to wait for the bus, so I jogged to the ranch. By the time I got there, I had a huge side cramp and I was shaking all over. I wasn't in great shape. I mean, they make us take PE and all, but I hardly ever did anything in gym class, except maybe screw around. Having 15 stitches in my shoulder didn't help either. Gasping, I flopped down onto the couch. I had tried to jog the whole way, but I ended up doing a combination of jog and fast walk. I had to start getting in shape. It took me almost 20 minutes to do those 2 miles. The puppy came up and pounced on my shoelaces. "Hey, pup," I panted. "I'll take you for a walk a little later, okay?" "Where are your books?" I looked up into Mr. H's frowning face. "Didn't need any. No homework tonight." He didn't bat an eye. Didn't say a word, just pointed at the door. "What?" "Go get your books." "You're joking." But I knew he wasn't. "All right, I've got some math, but I can do it in study hall." He just pointed to the door again. "I can't. I can't run like that again. It would take me at least 30 minutes to get back, probably closer to 45. I knew Mr. H didn't care how long it would take for me to get my books. What mattered was me being able to do my homework after dinner. I argued half-heartedly for another couple of minutes, even though I knew I wasn't going to change his mind. When I could tell he was getting really irritated with me, I started back towards the school. Leaving the house, I couldn't make up my mind how I should go back to school. Should I take my time and prove my point to Mr. H? Or should I hurry to get back to feed Nicker? I walked as fast as I could. The school looked as deserted as a tomb. Everyone was gone but the secretary and a couple of teachers. I was able to get to my locker. Not only did I have math, but I also had a short story to finish for English and social studies worksheet. And I had forgotten to turn in my journal entries. Maybe it was worth going back for my books. I stopped to drop off my journal and see if Mrs. Walker had picked up my paper. I guess she really had left school early, because the paper was still there, on top of the late paper basket. When I stepped out of the school, snow had started to fall. I settled into a nice pace, enjoying the quiet flakes that drifted in circles on the air to the ground. I thought of Christmas, and for the first time in my life, I wondered where I would be then and what it would be like. I knew it wouldn't be like it had been the last 5 years. I wouldn't let it be. I was a block and a half from the school when I got the feeling someone was behind me. I turned around and my instincts proved to be right. Rick was about 10 feet back and closing fast. He stopped abruptly when I turned around, but then he continued with an even more arrogant strut. "Yo, farm boy, I need a word with you." "There's no farm boy here for you to have a word with." "Hey man, that's cool," he said, holding both his hands out from the side. "You don't want to be called farm boy. Do me a small favor, and I'll see to it no one ever calls you farm boy again." "No deal," I said, turning to continue on my way. "Hey man," he said, grabbing my jacket and spinning me around. "That ain't friendly. I ain't even asked you yet. How come you turned me down?" "Nothing personal," I said, although we both knew it was, and I calmly removed his hand from my jacket. "I just don't believe in favors." He stepped in close to my face, so close our noses almost touched. "Look, man," he growled, "I'm really getting sick of you and your attitude. Somebody needs to straighten you out." My stomach was doing backflips, the way it always did when I sensed a fight or action coming on, but I stayed ice cold on the outside. "Well, you've been saying that for years. You finally gonna volunteer?" I drawled softly. "Nope, I don't think so. That would take guts." Rick took a slight step back and pulled his arm back, but he stopped at the honk of a horn. I glanced and saw a familiar beat-up blue truck pull up. "Hey, Sean," Jane said, rolling down the window. "Want to lift home?" "Yeah," I said. "That'd be great." "See you later," Rick said, strutting off. "Farm boy." "Didn't mean to cut in on our conversation with your friend," James said as I got in. "He's not my friend," I said shortly. "Oh," James paused. "Well, that makes me feel better." I glanced at him. "Why?" "Well," he said, "you're not supposed to know this, but boss sent me to give you a lift home. He felt bad about making you go back to school. Of course, I'm just supposed to be on my way home from the feed store, and I just happened to see you and offer you a ride." I smiled. "I won't tell." "Good," he nodded. If I had thought you were just wasting time with a friend, I probably would have left you here. But no offense, you two didn't look friendly. Like I said, we're not. You know, Sean, it'd be a real shame if you were to get in trouble so soon again, especially if you really want to stay with Mr. H. The court wouldn't look on new trouble as a good reason for letting you stay. I know, I said, keeping my voice steady, even though I was seething inside. James didn't even know what had been going on, but right away he was directing the blame toward me. I didn't say anything for the rest of the drive home. I just sat and let the familiar anger eat at my mind. As we got out, he turned to me with a grin. That pup's been following Boss around all day. I even caught him picking him up once or twice. I think between the two of you, you can convince him to keep it. And just like that, my anger towards James melted away. Chapter 16. I dropped my books on the desk in my room and grabbed an apple off the kitchen table on my way to the stable. James said he thought Mr. H was out there. That made it convenient for me. Everyone I wanted to see was in the same building. I stopped at Nicker's stall first. He was almost bouncing off the walls. Hey boy, you want to go outside? He head-butted my arm and I lost the apple. He beat me to it, slobbering on it and trying to eat it. He dropped it several times, but managed to get some small pieces off of it before I got it back. When I took it from him, I kind of panicked. Were apples bad for horses? He didn't seem to think so. He was still trying to get at it. Something tugged on my pant leg, and I looked down to see the puppy snarling at me, with my jeans firmly pressed between his teeth. I looked up, and sure enough, Mr. H was right behind him. How was your first day back? Fine, I shrugged, except for having to walk there twice the first day. It may have been my imagination, but I could have sworn he flushed just the slightest bit. Nicker butted his head against my back, reminding me of my question. Are apples bad for horses? He laughed. Far from it. It's kind of like giving a special cut of a steak to a dog. Why, have you introduced Nicker to apples? Accidentally, I told him about my lost apple. Well, it's good that he's interested enough in solid foods to go for the apple. He probably didn't get too much of it with his new teeth. The puppy found a way to squirm in under the stall door. He and Nicker were both pretty interested in each other. Nicker blew on him and he scampered away, but then he yipped at Nicker and it was Nicker's turn to jump. Mr. H cleared his throat. The pup does seem to fit in here pretty well. He's not afraid of the horses and the cattle, and he shows enough sense to stay out from under their feet. Maybe we ought to think of a good name for him. I tried not to grin too broadly. Well, I think that's your job. My job? He's your puppy, I said, nodding toward the pup. He had come back out of the stall and was sitting patiently at Mr. H's feet. He never took his eyes off him, and his tail was cutting a wedge in the dirt from all the wagging. Mr. Hasser leaned back against the stall, looking at the pup. He reminds me of a dog that used to live up the road when I was a boy. He shook his head. That was one slick dog, prettiest thing you ever did see, and quite possibly the smartest. You know who Lassie is? Sure, I've seen the reruns. Reruns? Ha! He shook his head. Anyway, that dog could make Lassie look like a chump, only he wasn't working from a script like Lassie did. So what was this wonder dog's name? He didn't answer, just watched the puppy for a few minutes. I was looking at the puppy too, when Mr. H softly said, Cody. The puppy stood up and whined, with his head cocked to one side, and increased his tail wagging. Now his whole body was twisting from one side to the other. We looked at each other, not saying anything. Suddenly, Nicker stuck his nose over the half door and nickered at us. We both burst out laughing. I might be wrong, he said after we had calmed down a bit, but I believe the name has been approved. I guess both names were, I agreed. Come on, Sean, let's go feed the little guy. And ourselves, I'm starving. Hey, Cody, want to go out? I asked, as I was sitting at the kitchen table doing makeup work. I had been there for the last hour and a half, and my brain was tired, and my butt was sore. It was time to take a break. Cody was curled up in his basket next to the oven, sleeping soundly. He didn't need to go out, but I did. Hey, Cody, I said a little louder. He looked up and blinked his eyes at me. He yawned, stretched his front legs straight out in front of him, and closed his eyes. Stupid dog, what good are you? I asked crossly. I slumped down in the chair and hung my head over the back. I stopped when I saw Mr. H upside down in my doorway. Hey, I said, straightening up. Hey yourself, you look like you need to go play in the hay and wake up. I know, I was trying to get Cody to wake up so I would have a reason to go out. Mr. H just raised his eyebrows. I looked down at my feet. There was Cody, sitting on my shoelace, looking wide awake. Stupid dog, I said again. Go on, Mr. Hassler said. Take him and take your 15-minute break. The snow was still falling, and it was already about 3 inches deep on the ground. I grabbed my jacket on the way out the back door and led Cody back behind the house to do his business. As little as he was, it didn't take long, so I thought we'd have time to wander down to the barn. I didn't hurry because Cody was having a great time in the snow, bouncing around and chasing snowflakes. The minute I hit the light switch just inside the door, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know just what it was, but I felt my stomach tighten up. I walked slowly down the row of stalls, trying to figure out what was wrong. A couple of the horses were dozing, but almost all of them were very awake. They seemed restless. Nicker was backed into the far corner of his stall, and his eyes looked bigger than normal. I noticed he was shaking. He stayed in the corner even when I got close to his stall door. Hey, Nick, I said softly. What's up? I jumped back with my heart in my throat as a shadowy figure rose up from the nearest stall wall right in front of my face. I was so busy looking down the barrel of a gun, it took me several seconds to focus my eyes on Rick. Bang, he said softly and slowly lowered the hammer. What are you doing here? I demanded. I asked you nicely to do me a favor, but you weren't very friendly. Rick, you and I both know you wouldn't do me any favors. I don't need to do any for you, so why don't you just take off? Oh, I'm so hurt, Rick whined sarcastically. I'd do anything for you, Farmy. I swallowed. He actually has a gun, I told myself. You better be careful. What do you want? Oh, nothing. I'm just here to say hi. The way he dragged out the last word and kind of almost sang it, I knew he was on something. Well, hi, Rick. Why don't you just get out of here? I will, farm boy. I will, but first we need to figure out a good time for me to come back on Wednesday. There isn't a good time on Wednesday. Just leave. We can say hi in the hallway. He shook his head slowly, waving the pistol back and forth in front of my face. His eyes looked glazed, like he couldn't see straight. No is not the right answer, farm boy. The deed is done. No one needs to get upset. Just tell me a good time to come back and, he continued, stopping the pistol when it was aimed straight at Nicker's head. I think you need to be a little more polite when you say it. He slowly pulled the hammer back. I opened the stall door. Rick stared at me as I glanced around the stall. Nicker came over and stuck his head under my arm. Aw, ain't that cute? You've got your own grown mutt. He looks just like you, farm boy. I saw what I had been looking for. While I was at school, I had heard about Rick's recent purchase, and I was sure he was here looking for a hiding place. And he seemed to think Nicker's stall was the perfect spot. The straw was piled up in a corner, and I could see part of a plastic bag sticking out from the bottom of it. Rick, you're just going to have to find another place for your stash. It's no good here. Sure it is. No one's going to suspect some old farmer. I shook my head. I was still trying to reason with him. If he hadn't had the pistol, I would have beat the tar out of him, and that would have been the end of it. The gun changed all the odds. No, Rick, it's not good. The horses not only kick the straw around and sleep on it, they also eat it. If you leave it here, you're just going to spend a ton of money getting some horses really messed up. He looked at me, and I could tell he was concentrating as hard as he could. Without drugs in his system, he wasn't a bright thinker, but once he got high, almost all functions came to a stop. Now, see, you've pissed me off. You've wasted my time. How have I wasted your time? I demanded. If you'd been a little more cooperative this afternoon, this whole problem wouldn't exist. I wouldn't have wasted my time bringing all this stuff out here. But since you weren't nice, you created a problem. So now, he leveled the gun at me, Solve it, smart boy. I had trouble following Rick's logic and how this was my problem, but I wasn't in any position to argue. Okay, give me the details and I'll see what I can do to help you out. I think I might have eventually been able to talk Rick into leaving with his drugs. Another 10 minutes and I might have been able to avoid the whole situation. Unfortunately, the timing was bad. Sean? Mr. H called down the row of stalls. Rick quickly dropped down behind the stall wall where he couldn't be seen. Sean, your 15 minutes are up. Be there in a minute, I responded, hoping my voice didn't reveal my fear. The pistol was aimed in my general direction, swaying ever so slightly. No, you'll be there now. I could tell by his voice that he was getting closer. Get him out of here, Rick hissed at me. Get him out of here or I'll shoot your pony. When he aimed straight at Nicker's eye, the gun wasn't swaying anymore. Mr. H, I called, trying desperately to think of something, anything that would possibly get him to leave. I'm just trying to find Cody. He wandered off. I leaned over the stall door. My heart dropped to my stomach. Mr. Hasser was 10 feet away. Cody was at his heels. I know, he said. This pup learns quicker than you do. 15 minutes. We had a deal. I know, I promise. I'll be right in. Just give me a few more minutes to say goodnight to Nicker. Nicker doesn't need you to tuck him in. What he does need is to have you keep your butt out of trouble so you can be around to help him this winter. He's depending on you. I risked a quick glance at Rick. He was still sitting with his back against the wall, and the gun was still trained on Nicker's head. Mr. H had no idea how right he was. Mr. Hasser looked like he was almost ready to come in the stall and get me. Mr. H, please, I just need more time to think. About what? I tried not to panic. We read this story for English, I lied, about this kid and his grandfather, and it got me thinking. What about it? Well, it's really hard for me to talk about, actually, I said as Nicker moved away from me and stuck his nose over the door. It's hard for me to think about. That's why I'd really like to have some more time to myself to think. Why? Well, because it really reminded me of you. He looked at me. He wasn't buying it. As frustrated as I was with Rick's stupidity, I was wishing Mr. H would get a bad case of it right now. He was being too smart for his own good. See, I was grasping desperately at any straw I could find. In this story, this guy was in World War II, and he had a run-in with an enemy soldier, and, well, it made me think of your story the other night when you said that I wouldn't understand why a bullet was the most important thing. And you were right, so I'm trying to figure it out right now, but if I can't, I'd like to talk to you about it later when I come back to the house. I was rambling, and I knew it, but I couldn't stop. Mr. H was looking at me like he'd never seen me before. Did you hit your head again? I shook my head. Do you think I hit my head? I shook my head again. Then why are you giving me this load of crap? It's not a load of crap. Please, Mr. H, just give me 10 more minutes. I swear, I'll be back in 10 minutes. He looked at me. You're a smart boy, Sean, and I think you know better than to pull this crap with me. I know you understand why the bullet's important to me. No, I don't. I really don't. I know you do, because you thanked me for the chocolate in the hospital. Yeah, the sweat was dripping down my back. I thank you because it's important, but I don't know why it's important. I could feel Rick's mocking stare pinning me to the wall. He was looking at me, but the gun was still trained on Nicker. I'll tell you why. His voice dropped, and I could tell he was really angry with me. I really wanted to explain the whole thing to him, tomorrow when this was all over. The chocolate's important because it was the only thing he had left that seemed valuable to him. But the bullet's even more important because it was absolutely the last thing he had to give, the last thing he could use to defend himself and keep me at a distance, and he still gave it to me. I looked at him, trying to plead with my eyes, the way Nicker had the first day. Can I please have some more time to think about that so I can really understand it? Well, now, Sean, I don't get what's going on here, but you can have all the time you need to think at the kitchen table. His voice got hard. Get your tail back up to the house where it belongs. But Mr. H, I said desperately. Damn it, boy, can't you hold a bargain for even 3 days? He bellowed. throwing open the stall door and barging in to get me. He froze at the same gun report that made Nicker and me jump. Nicker bolted back to the far corner of his stall, while Mr. H and I looked at Rick. He was lowering the pistol from over his head. No one is hurt, I thought. He must have shot straight up. I hate to break up this touching scene, he said sarcastically, but it's making me sick. Sorry you had to be so persistent, Pops. I don't think you're going to agree to the favor I've been trying to talk Sean into. He leveled the gun at Mr. H. So I think you may have to leave us soon. Rick, no, I cried. You can't. Without him, there's no ranch. You try to get rid of him, this place will be crawling with cops. Look, you've lost your hiding place. Just take off. I'll help you figure something else out tomorrow. We won't say anything. Like hell we won't, Mr. H growled. I tried to get him to shut up, but he wouldn't listen. This was a man who had fought in one of the most horrible wars this planet has ever seen. This was a man who had pulled himself out of a hole when he was 16 and never looked back. This was a man who had met life head on and called his own shots. How dare you try to push us around on my ranch? It's easy, Rick said with a sick smile. I dare because I have the gun. Rick, I said quickly, this is between you and me. Put the gun down and we can ditch this guy. I'll help you out. Rick slowly shook his head. I don't think so. He got to you, man. You care about him. You're not ice cold anymore. In fact, you're pretty useless. I laughed, a short bark of a laugh. I can't believe you actually thought I liked working here. I guess I ought to be an actor. I knew he had bought my snow job, I said, jerking my thumb towards Mr. H. But I didn't think anyone else would. Nice try, Sean, but no good. This ain't no snow job. Get off my land, Mr. H suddenly exploded. Rick sighed and looked at him. You know, old man, you're a real pain. I think you've hung around too long. He started to raise the gun. It's over, Rick, I said quietly. He looked at me in surprise, trying to hold the gun steady. It's over. This whole thing is stupid. Just put the gun down and walk away. We stared at each other in silence. The horses in the other stalls had calmed down. Mr. H and Nicker were forgotten. In this stare, I could feel all the hatred of the past years. He's jealous, I thought. He knows I've found something important here. Suddenly, he pulled the hammer back again. Now which one goes first? He asked with a serious expression on his face. What do you mean? I asked. My lips felt cold and dry. Well, farm boy, I warned you that if you didn't get rid of the old guy, I would have to kill your pony. So now they both have to go. He wouldn't do it, I said to myself. He hasn't got the nerve. Rick, I tried again. He began to shift his aim from Mr. H to Nicker and back again, passing over me each time. Eeny, meeny, miny, dragged out the last word, making his choice. I can't take the chance, I thought. I can't let him hurt Mr. H or Nicker. Rick moved the gun back and forth, a wild look in his eyes. The instant I saw the gun move past Mr. H, I lunged at Rick. I hit him, but I never felt it. The shot was loud, but it sounded strangely far away. I wanted to take the gun from him, but I couldn't get my hands up. My arms were numb. My chest was on fire. I tried to shake my head to stop the ringing in my ears, but I couldn't move at all. Through a thick fog, I saw Mr. Hassler yank the gun from Rick's hand and then backhand him across the face with it. In slow motion, he moved to my side. I saw his lips move, but the roar in my ears was so loud I couldn't hear him. I had to tell Mr. Hassler something important. Then everything went dark, and the last thing I felt was Nicker's warm breath on the back of my neck. Epilogue. Mrs. Walker came into Sean's hospital room. It was the third time she had been there in as many days. Mr. Hassler was in his usual post at the side of Sean's bed. "He just missed his dad," Mr. Hassler said without looking up. Mrs. Walker stood by the bed for a moment. She gently brushed the hair off Sean's forehead. Then she went over to Mr. Hassler. "How is he?" she whispered. "He's hanging in there. He came around for a few minutes earlier this morning. The doctors are hopeful." Mrs. Walker reached over and squeezed Mr. Hassler's hand. "He's a tough kid. He'll make it," he finished for her. They sat quietly for a few moments, watching Sean's breath and listening to the various machines beep and hum. "Oh," Miss Walker said as she reached into her bag and pulled out some papers. "Here, this is the essay that Sean wrote about heroes. I thought you'd like to read it." "Thank you, Michelle." Mr. Hasser began to read. My Hero Is by Sean Parker. My hero is no one. Heroes don't exist anymore, at least not in my world. Heroes used to come in all shapes and sizes, and that's why it's so sad that we don't have them anymore. Our world today has taken the ancient eye for an eye motto to the extreme of whole estate for an eye. People are so caught up with getting more and having the best of all the more that they can get that they don't care how many toes, shoulders, or heads they step on to get there. My hero is no one. Heroes used to exist in America. They've only recently disappeared. In fact, some people still try to be heroes. These people are brave, loyal, morally right, and willing to sacrifice themselves to help others. You've probably met such a hero. Chances are good that when you met this hero, you recognized the above qualities, but gave the hero a different name, like chump, suck up, or pathetic fool. Somewhere along the line, people quit respecting heroes. They're no longer looked up to or even supported. Look at Batman and Robin. The faithful readers of the comic strip replied overwhelmingly to a poll that the artist had. The question was, should Robin live? The nearly unanimous answer, no. They voted to kill a hero. It was a conscious decision reflecting the unconscious nationwide trend. Heroes used to stop along the roadside, just to help a stranded soul change his tire. Today, that action may put your life in danger, because you no longer know who has a gun in the glove box. Is it the Hispanic in the El Camino, or the 40-year-old white business lady in the Probe? I don't know. Neither do the rest of us, and we're not ready to take the chance of self-sacrifice to find out. My hero is no one. America had many war heroes, men who kept going back into battle, even after their fourth Purple Heart, men who went back, against orders, to save another man in their platoon. Men who went into battle against incredible odds, knowing they might not return home, but they went anyway, ready to sacrifice themselves so that others might have a chance to have a better life. Today we don't fight many wars. Today the people that most school-age kids look up to are found in some sort of professional sport. Today these men quit a team they played with for 4 years just to get an extra million for the season. Never mind the coach who saw their potential and developed it. Never mind the teammates who helped make them look good. Never mind the thousands of loyal fans who cheered whenever they saw them on the street. Never mind that they've already got 12 million socked away from the last 3 years. They want to get more. Why should they be loyal and sacrifice themselves to play a game they love for a team that supported them, if the other team will now offer them 4 million instead of only 3 million? How on earth can we expect them to make such an incredible sacrifice? My hero is no one. To name someone as your hero puts pressure on them. People don't want that pressure. They don't want to be good or looked up to, because then they run the risk of failure. It's easier in this life to glide by. It's easier not to put yourself on the line by doing things for others. My hero is no one. To name someone as your hero also makes you vulnerable. When your heroes fail, when they show themselves to be only human, it hurts. To name someone as your hero is to put your trust in them. And, as we all know, trusting someone other than yourself is risking being sacrificed. Heroes still exist. They are no longer named, no longer recognized, no longer trusted. There are fewer and fewer heroes each year. I'm surprised they haven't been put on the endangered species list. If you find someone who is brave, loyal, and willing to do these extra things for you, don't say anything to them. Just stay close to them and pay attention. You could learn a lot. My hero is somewhere.